Hello, everyone. Oh my gosh, WTF is back for 2025. I am super excited. We have an amazing panel today. And I know a lot of times we start the year and, a lot of planning happens in December. We're still talking about things in January, but there's still a ton of stuff to figure out. And so, in typical WTF fashion, I'm trying to bring together the best of the best to tell you what's top of mind for them, what they're thinking about, and how you can steal some of their great ideas to inform your strategy this year. So, with that, a couple housekeeping notes. I am your host, Brandice, and we like for this to be a very interactive session, conversation, whatever you want to call it. So, I want you to ask questions. I want you to ask questions while people are talking. We want to address things live. And that's so that you guys are getting the content and getting the information that is most relevant to you. So obviously, I come together with some sort of loose format of conversation around this topic. And today we are tackling, what are some predictions for 2025? I asked our panel to be as unfiltered as possible. So, push the envelope a little bit, ask great questions, like don't be shy. We want to hear from you. And tell us where you're watching from. So with that, I am going to bring our esteemed panel on stage. First up, we have Celinda Appleby, Head of Global Talent Attraction at Visa. We've got Tim Brown, who's the VP of TA at Chobani. And last but certainly not least, we have Steve Bartel. It's his first WTF. Give him a warm welcome. CEO and co-founder of GEM. Welcome to you.
Hello.
Great to be here.
Hey, everyone.
Tim let me know that we can say Happy New Year until tomorrow. So then we stop. So I'm going to say Happy New Year to everyone. Welcome to 2025. With that, let's start with some intros. Tim, let's start with you. Tell the people who you are. And as a caveat for our icebreaker, what song is getting you through your WTF moment this week?
Oh, wow. Well, hi, everyone. It is so nice to meet you. And hi from sort of sunny New York City today. I'm based here at our headquarters in Soho, in Manhattan. I have the great fortune to lead talent acquisition for both Chobani and La Colombe. And for those of you who are big Chobani fans, thank you. And let me know what your favorite flavors are, please. Favorite song? Wow. I'm raised in Philadelphia, so I have to go Eye of the Tiger from Survivor. It just brings back those Rocky emotions. And I think this year, pushing hard, working ourselves, it's all about, a new year and a new set of expectations. So nice to meet you all. And thanks for the invite in.
Amazing. That is intense. I love that, Tim. Celinda, hi.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be back and Happy New Year to all. I am based out of sunny Portland, which is shocking to me too. But we have a lot of sun here today. And my song is, I should tell you where I work. I'm currently the head of talent attraction here at Visa. We're all just amongst friends. I forgot that was important. And the song that's getting me through it is Bad Bunny, dropped an album on January 5th. I've helped him get to #1 in the world because that's all I'm playing. So if you're looking for some good music, I highly recommend the album.
That's amazing. That's what I say about myself and SZA. Like I'm responsible for at least 80% of her streams on the spot, for sure. Steve, it's so good to have you at WTF. Who are you? Tell the people who you are.
Great to be here. Thanks for putting this on. This is so cool. I've always wanted to hop on one of these. I love this series. It's really, really cool to get to talk openly about what are some of the biggest challenges that we're all facing. So Steve, co-founder, CEO here at GEM. You're not gonna believe it, Tim. I'm sorry. Eye of the Tiger. I was also first song that came to mind. I'm gonna go with a different prompt. What's the song that hypes me up? Final Countdown.
Oh, that's a good one.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can just imagine you in the office, you're just
running.
That's right.
Amazing. Well, we are here to talk about your predictions. You all are very, very smart people. So we're going to lean into that today around 2025, what's happening in the industry, kind of what you're seeing. So I'm just going to start us off by saying 2025 is here. It's been a week and I've already seen a ton of things coming down the pipe. People are talking about a lot that's going to happen this year. And so as an intro, you look at 2024 and kind of all the changes that happened in the market. 23 was like, very similar. But what we don't talk a lot about is blind spots. So for this year, like what's the one blind spot or underestimated challenge you think will catch recruiting teams off guard? Sally, I'll start with you.
This is a heavy one to get started with. For me, right off the front, Kate. So for me, I think we're going to continuously see unprecedented volume of applications. In fact, I ran some numbers before I joined the call, and we're close to almost 400,000 applications one quarter in, obviously our fiscal year. And so the blind spot to me is enabling the recruiting teams because we're under-resourced and underfunded. And so enabling recruiting teams to be nimble, and that candidate experience is really going to be a hot topic this year. I think it's something that we're all going to be talking about more so than previous years. And it's something I think that is going to be very important to all teams to really get a handle across their candidate experience.
Tim, what about you?
I hate to start off my first interaction in this format with a ditto, but I couldn't agree more with Celinda's comments. I think people have underestimated and employers have underestimated the candidate experience, and it's showing up on Glassdoor. It's showing up on frustration amongst individuals who are either underemployed or unemployed and want to be treated with respect and will be vocal about that. And so I think that's going to be a big call out and opportunity. And, I think the second piece of this is going to be how we use technology to be a force multiplier so that recruiters get more capacity back to deliver against those experiences. I don't know if I'm the first new customer in 2025 or the last customer to sign in 2024, but, Chobani and La Colombe made the decision to come over to GEM because we need CRM capabilities to help support our recruiters from an efficiency and productivity perspective. Steve, I saw it at Peloton. I saw it in a prior company as well. And, it's an important tool for us. So this isn't a commercial shout out, but it is an aspect of looking at your processes and looking at your tools and saying, are you giving your recruiters the time that they need to deliver on the things that matter? And it's not necessarily about efficiency, it's about experience.
Sweet, am I next? And I swear we didn't say Tim planned that. Really appreciate it. The shout out, Tim. Look, I think that one of the biggest challenges that our industry has faced, that talent acquisition teams has faced over the last few years, is like a lot of start-stop, a lot of unpredictability with like hiring needs. And so I think that next year we might see that even more. One of the things, even to give folks insight into like how finance teams are thinking about planning these days, is it's a lot different from like how it used to be, where finance teams would put together entire plans for the whole year. A lot of companies are like taking a more nimble approach where they're unlocking that new headcount based on hitting certain back-end efficiency objectives or certain revenue targets. And so I think we're going to see even more of that this year. And it's going to be an exciting time, I think. I actually think that we're going to see more hiring is my guess as companies start to hit these targets and overperform. But I think a lot of folks, if we're not prepared, are going to be caught off guard by a lot of that.
Yeah. So let's dig into a little bit. I'm going to call you Sally because we're friends, but Celinda because your name says Celinda on there, and it's like right now.
It confuses people.
So you mentioned tech as a force multiplier. So let's talk about technology. Like, as we're looking at investments for this year, and Steve, I'm going to throw this to you because you work at a technology company, so you might have some insights here. What's a tech trend or tool that you're hearing about that recruiting teams will actually regret buying into this time next year? And like, what's one that you think will finally prove its value?
All right. So I think the answer to both of those is going to be the same. It's going to be AI technology. I think that we're at this really interesting moment in time, and this happens with every major technology disruption, where we go through what's called a hype cycle. Originally, like a brand new piece of like really disruptive tech comes along, folks are really excited about it, the promise of it, and that's the upward curve of the hype cycle. And then what happens is there's like an explosion of technology, and not everybody knows yet like what it's going to be useful for. And I think that's exactly where we are right now with a lot of AI. There's some really valuable use cases, but there's also a proliferation and in some ways like a lot of noise. It's hard to know what's real and what's not. And so I think that some folks are going to land really amazing AI technology that drives a lot of value. Other folks are going to get burned by things that aren't real. And I think that's the challenge with AI that we're in, the moment we're in right now, but also as we look ahead to next year, is like separating the noise from what's real.
So I see you nodding.
I was going to say something different. I think people are going to regret chatbots. And the reason this is I read, I mean, I don't know how y'all feel about chatbots, no disrespect to anyone there, but as time has progressed with chatbots, because I've seen a lot of companies last year were talking a lot about launching these in their systems, is more often than not, 81% of people, and this is a Forbes stat, want to talk to a human being versus a parrot, And what I've seen with chatbots is companies are implementing them with like, a couple of AI agents, a handful of use cases, and they're not refreshing. And so we are just going back and forth with the same questions over and over, which are going to continue to exasperate the candidate experience. And so I do not recommend chatbots. Honestly, in TA in any capacity, I think people want people, and we need to bring that human element back to the forefront.
Agreed. Tim, I want to give you a chance to shine, but listen, it is okay if you have nothing to say. We'll get plenty of insights from you in a bit.
I tossed mine in the comment section. I'm sorry, but I hate talking to my bank via a chat bot. Like I'm a hit zero person over here. Give me a live individual if I have to wait. And I think candidates are speaking and saying chatbots just don't add value. They don't create an experience with me and with the brand, and you don't leave me coming back for more. So I couldn't agree more.
Amazing. So since we're talking about candidates, let's just kind of jump over to Celia, your area of expertise with employer brand and candidate experience. So what's a prediction that you can share about how the power dynamic between employers and candidates will shift this year?
I'm hoping that things will stabilize this year and we move towards a candidate-driven market, but there's just too many factors at play to make that bold prediction. What I do think is going to differentiate companies is the ability to provide stability, because there's so much economic uncertainty. So if the company can come out and be honest and transparent about the stability that they'll provide candidates and future employees, I think those people will win. But messaging needs to change in the sense that we need to be transparent about performance, expectations, so meaning we're going to give you stability, but this is what we expect. Sort of, I didn't make this up. Charlotte Marshall and Brian did, but that give and get is going to be very important in 2025 as we look to see how this economy stabilizes and the candidates are winning. I mean, we want to see them win, right? And so there's a lot of work to be done there.
Tim, how are you thinking about this at Chobani?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. Firstly, I think to create a relationship with your stakeholders and especially with candidates, you have to have a two-way conversation. There are so many horror stories about ghosting candidates in 2024. People applying to hundreds of roles or making it through 6 rounds of interviews. And we have to stop that stuff once and for all. I think this might be the year where the lawyers finally lose and we train recruiters on how to actually give feedback and give compassion and give insights back to candidates and help them be able to find the job of their dreams, even if it's not necessarily with our company right now. And bring the human being back to the process. So I think that's going to be a big change. Our lawyers aren't going to like it. It's going to require a lot of training, but that's what we get paid to do. And I hope that's where we see this year pivot for all of us.
Amazing. So when we look at this across the board, right, a lot of this, when you look at, stability, you look at managing application volume, you look at efficiency overall, like we're obviously bringing AI back into the conversation and how it can help. And so Steve, and we have a couple questions in the Q&A around AI, so I'm gonna try to put all of this together, but AI is dominating the conversations in recruiting right now. But in your opinion, Steve, what's one thing that no one is talking about when it comes to AI, but they should be talking about?
Ooh, good question. I think it goes back to this question about what's real and what's not. I think it's so hard to separate the noise from what's real right now. And actually, here's one thing. I think one thing that nobody's talking about that they should be is a lot of like companies are dressing up heuristics or like simple automation as AI, and they're just calling it AI to ride the hype train. Have you seen this, Tim, Sally? Like, right? Like all over
Yeah.
the place. It's like, oh, wait, that's just like a filter or a sort in the product. It's like a feature. There's no Gen AI behind it. Here's another thing that people aren't talking about. A lot of companies out there are taking their old AI that was built on the old obsolete tech stack and, riding on this hype train as well. They're not leveraging any of the new generative AI technology that's actually made this stuff better. So
Yeah.
I mean, even when I think about separating the hype from the noise, like these are some good questions to be looking into when looking at vendors that are selling AI.
So then let's like translate this to like the real world, right? Like Tim, Sally, you're evaluating AI tools. You're trying to look for what is real, what is noise, what is not. And hopefully, obviously, your vendors, folks like Steve, are thinking about these things and trying to make sure that, actually providing solutions that work. But there's a gap between, a product and a vendor and the person that's using it, at their company. So like looking at all of this, how are you two evaluating tools and trying to make some different choices in 2025?
I mean, we're looking at AI through the lens of how can it help give our team members and our stakeholders capacity pack to more value added kinds of focus. So can we use nudge algorithms so that our recruiters get nudged if maybe they haven't followed up with a candidate and they should be following up with a candidate? Nudging a manager, not through nasty gram multiple emails, but like through a true nudge, it comes through the ATS and reinforces and reminds them to follow up on something. I don't miss maybe a candidate that could be a great prospect where I'm not necessarily automatically dispositioning people because they didn't hit a number, but I'm not missing out on potential great candidates simply because of where they stacked in the Boolean rankings. Where it's not helping us chatbots, where it's not helping us is in things like drafting emails. Like the emails always look terrible. They always look like they're written by an AI. And for those of you who are LinkedIn users, and I'm sorry, LinkedIn, if you're here, hi, like please work on this. But InMail has gotten to be so all-consuming and such high volume that it's now spam. And I want to see AI in that space. It makes it easier to navigate to the messages that matter. And then, I think we're seeing AI in other areas like Microsoft. If you use Copilot, if you're a Microsoft stack, it's actually made my life better and it's made my team's life better. Being able to just summarize interviews. I would love to see AI overlays on top of our interviews so that we can not have to focus on documentation, but actually focus on the conversation. And there's some partners out there. So there's areas that are making an impact, and there's areas that, to Steve's point, are kind of vapor. It sounds like AI, but it's actually not. The robots aren't making our lives better.
Yeah, I'm going to say ditto to you this time. I completely agree with everything that you said. For us, I'll say Visa has been in the AI space as a company for a little over a year. Our CTO is very interested and a champion, if you will, of AI. And so we've been using Copilot. We have an internal chat GPT tool. And so a lot of the work we've been doing with our TA teams is to enable them to use that in their day-to-day calendaring, email, summaries of meeting notes, to take away some of that administrative feature, but we haven't pulled that through to the candidate experience or anywhere across the hiring process right now. Due to legal and other factors, we worry a lot about bias and inclusivity. And so that still comes and plays a lot in what we do. We are exploring new tools for the 25-26 year. And then I think we'll play more into those AI conversations of how that, plays into the interviewing and attraction cycles.
If I can just chime in here before we move on, building on two things like that Sally and Tim said, I think if I were to summarize it up, the other thing that's happening is there's a lot of like hype around like these AI agents that are claiming to be able to replace humans. And we're just not there yet. To Sally's point around like these chatbots that aren't like they're trying to fully replace humans, or Tim's point around like these AI drafting that are fully trying to replace like the comms. It just doesn't work. And so I think where we're going to see the most value from AI is when it's embedded directly into the products as targeted use cases, like what Tim was saying with like summarizing interview feedback or something like that, a very targeted use case versus trying to end-to-end replace a human. We're just not there yet.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. Like if I had to summarize this, for folks watching, it sounds like all of you are saying AI is really strong when, it's a sidecar to things that humans are doing to help them be better, more efficient, more
100%.
which is amazing. And so, I think, this year, if you're not thinking about AI that way, you should start thinking about it that way. And, try to implement things. I see people say all the time, well, where do I start with AI? Like, what can I do? And to Steve's point, if you're choosing the right solutions that have AI embedded into the product, then it takes some of the guesswork out of it for you and not, necessarily like onboarding like point solutions or bolt-ons to your existing technology. So did I get that right? I feel like sometimes I sound like such an expert and I'm like,
You nailed it.
amazing. So with that, with efficiency, with AI, with all of these things cost money. And a lot of things that are top of mind for folks in 2025 is, am I spending my money in the right place? If I've already spent it, what do I do? If I find out I haven't spent it well, if I need to ask for more budget because things are changing. And within that, there's been budget cuts and we're seeing what we're calling like the super recruiter. And to your point, Tim, like we're just having to do more and to enable our teams to be able to do more and do it better. So Tim, let's talk about doing more with less. What's the biggest lie we tell ourselves about doing more with less?
Wow. There's two things that really come to mind for me, and the first is that we have to be victims of budget cuts. I think so many times maybe your FP&A team or your CFO comes to you and says, we need to find $1 million. We need to find this. And it's so much about storytelling when it comes to coming back to the business and learning as recruiting leaders how to storytell different journey maps based upon budget impact. And really getting the leadership team into a place where they're having to choose that same journey with you with both budget additions and budget reductions. And so I think most leaders, especially CEOs, when you show them option A is a decline in service, a decline in outcomes, and probably longer term an increase in cost, you can sort of push back against the budget cost pace. I think the bigger lie that I'm seeing and amongst my peers is that recruiters need to be specialists. And I think that's going to be another trend in 2025 is the year of the generalist recruiter. Come on, generalist recruiters. And the idea there is that with businesses' priorities changing, to Steve's point, quarterly, sometimes weekly, if you have verticalized, specialized recruiters who can't cross over into different departmental areas or functional areas, you're going to be constantly redeploying resources inefficiently. And so we started back in late 2023, early 2024, cross-referencing our recruiters and creating 70%, 80% overlap between teams. And it allows us to be able to pull levers around capacity as the business priorities change. And I think that's going to get amplified in 2025, where the velocity of change with a new administration, with an unpredictable economy, is going to require all of us to be generalists across our teams and everybody to roll their sleeves and pitch in.
I don't know if you guys hear this, but this is a hot take. I could say I'm gonna throw it to you, Sally, but like Tim, people are saying preach and obviously agreeing with you because I also agree with you, but wow, okay, Sally.
No, I think that's fantastic. And I love that you're getting ahead of it, because I think if you're going to start later this year with trying to help your team become more generalist in nature, you're going to be behind the curve. And so if any, I think if anything you take away is you start working on making your teams more generalist. But my take from an employer brand perspective, we've been doing less, we're doing more with less for the past 3 years. And I just want to say that it is possible. Obviously, you're here because you have a CRM. Utilize it. That's my biggest thing. We've been running campaigns that are seeing a 70% open rate, which is higher than any other media or any other campaign that we're running. And that's because those leads are already warm. They're interested in who you are. And so if you're going to be doing more with less, spend your time in your CRM, create those hyper personalized communications, and the pool doesn't need to be 500 people. It's okay if it's 20, and start small, pilot in one recruiting area. It doesn't have to be your entire CRM to see results. And those results is what's going to get you more money, because the minute that you're able to show that you have an engaged community, you have the right communication, the leadership loves to see data like that. And you will be less, your budget will be less cut when you have data to demonstrate that the job you're doing is working.
Yeah, agreed. Want to just make some space for you, Steve, in case you have any thoughts.
Yeah, totally. I mean, actually, big plus one to what I heard from Tim. And I think there's both the specialization in terms of like, well, what types of roles do recruiters work on? But there's also the sourcing versus full cycle recruiter specialization. Actually, I've seen a lot of teams, so many companies got burned actually by hiring really big sourcing teams. And then when recruiting slowed down, especially in tech over the last few years, we were just faced with so many tough decisions. And so now as hiring ramps back up for some companies, I'm actually seeing more and more move to this model of, okay, let's get our full cycle recruiter sourcing. But let's also make sure to arm them with what they need to be able to do so effectively, because they're not spending all of their time all day on it. But honestly, I think the biggest lie we tell ourselves, and this is probably, I'm thinking from the CEO perspective or from the executive team perspective, is that teams can do more with less across every dimension, right? Where recruiters are handling 2x the rec load. To Celinda's point earlier, there's like 3x the inbound, and we're saying, hire for more roles with much more inbound volume, with less management and like enablement support, with less technology, sometimes budgets slashed to zero. And I just don't think that's possible. And so I do think this stuff needs to be a little bit more of a negotiation. And to Tim's point, option A versus option B. Well, yeah, maybe we could get away with not scaling up our recruiting team as much this year, but we need to actually allocate a little bit more budget for technology to make the team more efficient. And that's the kind of conversation that I think really strategic recruiting leaders can be having with their executives.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say to Tim's point as well, if we're being like very candid and real and honest about this, like when recruiters felt like their jobs were at stake, and, the recruiting teams were getting cut when tech was getting cut, a couple of years ago, that this is a way to kind of batten against that. I don't know why my brain just went blank, but like you just mentioned this as well, Steve, right? Like, but just in like very plain layman's terms, right? This is a really great strategy to not only like increase, stability and morale for recruiters just overall and not feeling expendable, but also being able to broaden their skill sets to move into more of a generalist, which I think is great. And then, to your point, Sally, let's you mentioned data. So let's talk about data really quick. And full disclosure, we have 9 minutes left, guys, and this has gone by so incredibly fast. So if you have questions, get them in. I'm going to ask the panel 2 more questions, and then we're going to just kind of see what happens. Okay, cool. So anyway, let's talk about data. Steve, over the last few years, recruiting has become much more data-driven. My read on this is that like it'll only continue to be the case as time progresses, and especially, this year. So what are the biggest things holding recruiting teams back from becoming more data-driven?
Yeah, and I totally agree with that trend. I just think over long periods of time, recruiting becomes more and more data-driven. It's inevitability, and we've already gotten a lot of the way there. We made huge strides. Honestly, I think the biggest thing that holds people back is just that like data is trapped in so many different disparate sources, right, across the stack. We have all these data silos because the recruiting stack just doesn't talk to each other as much. It's actually one of the reasons why at Gem we've been moving more and more towards this all-in-one direction where you can have a lot of products under one roof. We actually think that really simplifies the data problem. But yeah, I'm actually really curious to hear from Tim and Celinda, like what are the biggest challenges as it relates to your teams becoming more data-driven?
I mean, I will agree with what you said, having to pull data from multiple sources. So to produce my monthly reports, I have to go to 3 to 4 sources to create a cohesive story. As someone that is not a lover, I mean, I need the data, don't get me wrong, but to have to pull the reports and use my numerical brain is like the last thing I want to do on a daily basis. So I will say getting it on an all-in-one system is really important to see us thrive and to tell a full picture, like back to those journey maps that Tim was talking about. You're going to see a lot more companies request that. I think journey maps are going to be a hot topic this year. But anyways, back to your question. I think the challenge with data-driven reporting is the fact that we just don't have access to it, and it's all telling the same story. So you have to use there's bias, of taking multiple sources and coming up with a story on your own, and it's relative to the eye of the beholder.
So, maybe I'm old school on data and reporting, but when a manager asks me for data, my first reaction is, oh, shit. Because it usually means something's wrong. When everybody's happy with time to fill and happy with the quality, nobody wants to see data, nobody asks for reports, everything is awesome, right? It's when something's not going well that someone's like, I want to see the numbers, I want to see the data. So I usually will sort of start with the reaction of like, well, tell me why, what's going on. And there's always a qualitative that mirrors the quantitative. A big pivot for us this year was how can we create data that users can get access to themselves? Because we found pushing data out just wasn't super useful. People don't always click through. Sometimes for fun, and you didn't hear this from me, but like, just don't send the report and see if anybody notices. It's good to trust but verify on some of these data sets. But I think you have to ask yourself as a leader, what's the data that's meaningful to the business? And then, the second piece of the data is spend a lot of time with your finance teams. Make sure you're mirroring their format, how they think about percentages versus basis points, how they think about incrementality of OpEx versus CapEx or COGS versus get aligned to finance so that you are a business person and not an HR person when you're presenting your data. And then I think the third piece is you got to train your recruiters. We had some really great tools. I think to Sully's point, we had stuff all over the place, but our recruiters were so busy recruiting, they didn't know how to show up in front of a manager and give an overview of availability insights, or what does the market look like, and we dropped the ball. I dropped the ball in not training the team. And so, spending time investing in offsites, investing in tools and training, but in teaching them how to use this information strategically is important, because you can have it, but if people don't know how to use it, it's not very helpful.
Facts.
Yeah, agreed. All right, this is the last question. I'm gonna miss you guys. This was fun. So what's one prediction that you have about recruiting in 2025? I'm gonna ask you two questions. One that you really hope doesn't come true, and one that you hope really does. Celly.
Okay, one that I don't hope comes true. I saw James Ellis post something on LinkedIn that employer branding is going to become a dirty word, and that's just very scary for me personally. But what I think that means is that we're going to be under-resourced. Employer brand is not going to be top of mind in this economy. And that means EVP will be shelved and messaging will get static. And I really hope that doesn't happen. What I hope happens, that was the second one, right? Is that the economy stabilizes and hiring is booming and we're all super happy like we were in 2019. Can we bring back some 2019 vibes?
Love that. Tim.
What I hope doesn't happen, look, I hope the robots don't take over, but if you're listening, I will gladly serve my robot overlords and whatever you need. With that being said, look, I hope we got budgeting right in 2024 to 2025. If we didn't get it right, to Steve's point, guess what? We'll highlight the service impacts and we'll make adjustments and we'll get what we need to help support the business. And I really do hope that we focus a lot on candidate experience. And to Sully's point, yeah, I think brand matters, but let's listen to what candidates are telling us about our employment brands and then shape our culture so that our culture reflects the EVP that we want in the market.
Amazing. Steve.
Well, going back to some of the early predictions that I shared, I hope hiring's as predictable as possible next year. But on the flip side, I hope it's not, because I hope that we all see a really great recovery in hiring. I think that would be so cool to Sully's point, to get back to those 2019 days.
Amazing. I know that there are lots of questions in there, and I think there was one person who said we need a follow up to this conversation, and I agree. And so I am going to try to make that happen. In the meantime, if you're not connected with Tim or Sally or Steve on LinkedIn, connect with them, ask them questions. Like I'm telling you, they're very smart people. And I think that they're willing to lend some of those insights and learnings to just like the broader community, which is why I am so grateful that all three of you joined us on WTF today. I hope it was an amazing experience for you as well. And if there's anything we didn't answer, email me, Brandice@Gym. I'll make sure we get it into the next conversation. But thank you all so much for joining. And we'll see you at the next WTF.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.